The last war council of the Zephyr Dominion convened under a dome of fractured glass. What was once the crown jewel of Zephyr Prime had become a tomb waiting to be filled. Smoke curled through the ruined city outside, and the distant thunder of Tarkin war machines closing in was a cruel reminder that the end was near. Supreme Commander Zalvareth stood over the holographic display, his fingers trembling as he traced the glowing red markers. Enemy forces, countless in number, pressing in from all sides. "We have hours left," he muttered, his voice hollow. "Perhaps minutes." The gathered generals, advisors, and nobles exchanged weary glances. They had exhausted every strategy, every last soldier, every desperate counteroffensive. The Tarkans crushed them at every turn, their bioengineered war beasts consuming entire cities overnight. This was not war. It was extinction. "We should surrender," one of the nobles finally admitted, his voice brittle. "There is no path forward." The words barely left his mouth before Zalvareth's fist slammed the table, rattling the glass. "Surrender?" he hissed. "Do you think they will let us live? Look at those burning towers. Listen to the screams outside. There will be no surrender, only extermination." The council chamber fell silent. No one argued. Because he was right. A flicker in the hollow table caught Zalvareth's attention. A static cloak transmission, faint but persistent. He frowned and reached for the controls, bypassing the failing security locks. The signal sharpened. The image that emerged was strange. A human. He wasn't armored or desperate. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying them with a slow, calculating expression. Zalvareth stiffened. "Who are you?" The human smirked. "The only chance you have left." The Zephyr officers bristled. There were rumors of humans, scattered across the galactic rim, but they were considered insignificant. Primates, still clawing their way up the evolutionary ladder. What could one possibly offer here? "You are mistaken," Zalvareth said coldly. "We need an army, not a single mercenary." The human leaned back unfazed. "Then you'll be pleased to know I'm not alone." A second screen flickered on. Hundreds of humans. Soldiers, engineers, operatives. Some adjusting their weapons, others reviewing strategies. A war machine, but different from the Tarkans. There was no grandeur, no towering biobeasts bred for destruction. Just men and women, moving with eerie precision. "My name is Elias Voss," the man continued. "My battalion is Hell's Dogs. You need us. You just don't know it yet." Zalvareth exchanged wary glances with his council. "And what do you want in return?" There was no such thing as free aid in war. Voss's smirk didn't waver. "Money's irrelevant. What we want is a stake in the aftermath." His eyes sharpened. "When this war is over, we get our say in what happens next." Zalvareth felt a cold chill settle over him. The implication was clear. The Zephyr Dominion might win today, but there would be a price later. The doors burst open. A younger officer rushed in, panting. "The Tarkans are advancing. They've breached the second perimeter." The generals erupted in panic. Orders overlapped. Troop movements, emergency evacuations. Zalvareth watched it unfold with growing horror. It didn't matter what plans they had. They were all built on failure. Then he turned back to the human. Voss was watching him, patient, calm. The way a predator watches a wounded animal deciding whether to fight or lay down and die. Zalvareth exhaled slowly. "What do you need?" Voss's smirk faded, replaced with something colder, sharper. "Command authority. I don't need your approval for every move. I don't fight like you. I fight to win." The council erupted. The sheer arrogance. Handing control to an alien? A species that had no place in the galaxy's wars? But Zalvareth didn't argue. Because when he looked into Elias Voss's eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Certainty. Zalvareth raised his hand, silencing the protests. "You have command." Voss stood, stretching as if this was all a casual negotiation instead of the turning point of an entire war. "Good. First order, pull back all forces from the front line. The room exploded with ejections. Are you insane? That will leave the capital exposed. We're already outnumbered, and you want to give them more ground? Voss didn't flinch. Your current strategy has bought you nothing but graves. The Tarkans fight like a machine, predictable. I don't need brute force. I need them to think they've already won. Zalvareth hesitated. And then? Voss grinned. Then we show them what happens when you underestimate humans. There was something unsettling about the way he said it. The first orders were issued. Zephyr forces fell back, abandoning key defensive lines, allowing the Tarkans to advance unchallenged. From the outside, it looked like a full collapse. Exactly as planned. The human battalion moved in silence, slipping through the shadows of the ruined city, unseen. They set traps in places the Tarkans would never suspect: water filtration lines, abandoned civilian zones, the bodies of fallen Zephyr soldiers. By the time the Tarkans reached the city's heart, it was too late. One by one, the traps activated. Power grids short-circuited, plunging entire districts into chaos. Toxins seeped into water supplies. Entire regiments vanished into burning alleys, their screams swallowed by the flames. And then the real attack began. Not in open combat. Not in a battlefield clash. It started with whispers. Tarkan officers found their encrypted channels hijacked by eerie, distorted human voices, whispering in their guttural, alien tongue. We see you. We are already inside. Every night, patrols went missing. Not wiped out in battle, just gone. Weapons left behind, armor abandoned, no sign of struggle. Tarkans, once fearless, now moved in tight formations, jumpy at every shadow. Fear spread faster than fire. Inside the War Council chamber, Zalvareth watched the reports come in. The Tarkan advance had stalled. Their forces, despite their numbers, were hesitating. Their coordination was breaking. He turned to Voss, who was studying the chaos from the holotable with quiet satisfaction. They don't understand what's happening to them, Zalvareth murmured. Voss didn't look away from the map. They think war is about strength. We'll teach them it's about control. Zalvareth exhaled. You're monsters. Voss smirked. No. They are. We just learned how to be worse. The city was silent. Too silent. The Tarkans had stormed through the streets just hours ago, overwhelming what remained of Zephyr's defenses. But now, in the aftermath of their victorious advance, unease had settled into their ranks. Commander Relvok stood at the head of his regiment, sharp eyes scanning the ruins. They had expected resistance, last stands, desperate counterattacks, but there had been nothing. The enemy had melted away, leaving only abandoned barricades and empty streets. It felt wrong. We should be advancing, not waiting, one of his lieutenants grumbled. The Zephyr are finished. We should push straight to their command center. Relvok's mandibles twitched. No, he said, voice firm. Something isn't right. The city was too intact. A retreating army left behind burning wreckage, destroyed weapons, fallen banners. The Zephyr had left nothing but silence. Then came the first scream. Not from the front lines, but from the rear. A sharp, guttural cry, cut short. Relvok spun. Report! No answer. Another scream. Closer. His comms crackled. Commander! The voice cut off in a wet, choking gurgle. Panic spread. Soldiers twisted in every direction, weapons raised. Shadows stretched between the crumbling buildings, twisting, shifting. Something was watching them. A figure emerged. Small, weak-looking compared to a Tarkan warrior. Human. The soldiers tensed, weapons raised, but the human stood motionless, arms at his sides. No armor. No gun. Relvok frowned. Is this some kind of joke? The human smiled. Then the air filled with gunfire. It came from nowhere and everywhere. Hidden vantage points, rooftops, sewer grates. The first wave of Tarkan warriors collapsed before they even had time to react. Precision shots, head, throat, chest, every round placed with surgical accuracy. Relvok dove for cover, his warriors scattering. Ambush! The human was gone. Explosions erupted along the street. Not traditional mines, but carefully placed debris, rigged to turn walls and vehicles into shrapnel. Tarkin formations broke apart, the carefully drilled ranks collapsing into chaos. A soldier near Relvok twitched, then fell. No gunshot, no explosion, just a thin, almost invisible wire wrapped around his throat. His body was yanked backward into the darkness. The humans weren't fighting a battle. They were hunting. Relvok activated his comms. "We are under attack, multiple hostiles. Need immediate reinforcements." Static. His veins went cold. The Tarkin military network was unbreakable. No species had ever been able to interfere with their communications. Then the voices came. Not cipher. Not any known language. A low, distorted whisper crawled through every channel. "We see you." Relvok clenched his jaw. This was a psychological game. A trick. He would not fall for it. "Regroup," he barked. "Form defensive clusters, activate infrared tracking. They can't hide forever." His troops moved, rallying behind cover, weapons scanning the shadows. Then he noticed something. Their dead were missing. Bodies that had been lying in the streets were gone. No blood trails. No sign of dragging. Just vanished. A nearby lieutenant swore. "What kind of enemy does this?" Relvok exhaled sharply. "One that understands fear." They needed to move. Holding position would only make them easy targets. He signaled for a push toward the nearest supply depot, a fortified position that would give them a defensible stronghold. They never reached it. The humans had anticipated their route. Booby traps laced every alley, explosives wired to collapse entire buildings onto unsuspecting squads. Some Tarkins stepped into seemingly safe structures, only to trigger floors rigged to give way beneath them, dropping them into waiting ambushes. Every corner, every corridor, every open space, another death trap. This wasn't war. It was extermination. Hours passed. Reports came in sporadically, each one worse than the last. Entire squads wiped out without a trace. Tactical drones scrambled, trying to track the enemy's movements, but the humans were ghosts. Then came the final blow. A transmission, clear and deliberate. No distortion this time. Elias Voss's voice. "You made a mistake," he said casually. "You thought war was about strength. But it isn't." Relvok's claws dug into his palms. "You fight like cowards," he spat. Voss chuckled. "Cowards win wars. You ever wonder why humans survived our planet? We were never the fastest. Never the strongest. But we were the best at making sure something else died before we did." Silence stretched. Voss continued, his tone casual, like he was discussing a game. "Your forces are breaking. Your supply lines are compromised. You don't even know how many of you are left, do you?" Relvok's jaw clenched. "Let me help," Voss offered. A new signal came through. Data, raw and undeniable. The humans had been tracking them, monitoring their losses. 70% of the Tarkin occupation force was gone. 70. In a single night. The transmission ended. No threats. No demands. Just the cold, irrefutable fact that the war had changed. The Tarkins had come expecting a slaughter. Instead, they had walked into a nightmare. The fires still burned, but the battlefield had changed. The Tarkin war machine, once an unrelenting tide of destruction, had stalled. Their forces, accustomed to overpowering resistance through sheer brutality, now hesitated at every turn. Every street they took, every building they occupied, it all felt like a trap. Because it was. Elias Voss stood in the shadows of a shattered high-rise, watching through a drone feed as another Tarkin patrol advanced cautiously down a rubble-strewn avenue. Their movements were sluggish, their once disciplined formations frayed. Fear had set in. They weren't fighting an army anymore. They were surviving a hunt. He tapped his earpiece. "Kira, give them 5 more steps." A soft chuckle came through the channel. "On it." The moment the Tarkans moved into position, a hidden explosive embedded in the street lit up the night. The blast sent bodies flying, shrapnel tearing through their thick armor like paper. Voss turned away before the dust settled. He already knew how it ended. He stepped back into the darkness, moving through a series of corridors lined with human operatives. His soldiers, hardened veterans from wars no one cared to name, nodded as he passed. They didn't need orders, they understood the mission. Total extermination. The Cypher Command had begun to realize what they had unleashed. They had expected human soldiers to fight like every other species, force meeting force, honor against honor. Instead, they had witnessed something else entirely. War without rules. Voss reached a dimly lit command room, where holographic maps flickered over battered consoles. Zalvera stood at the center, his expression unreadable. The Cypher Supreme Commander had the look of a man who had prayed for a miracle and received a devil instead. "You've broken them," Zalverath admitted. His voice was tight, cautious. Voss took a sip from a metal flask before speaking. "Not yet." Zalverath frowned. 70% of their forces are gone. Their formations are shattered. What more is there? Voss set the flask down. "You're thinking like a soldier." The Cypher commander stiffened. Voss leaned forward. "Tarkans don't just fight wars, they dominate. They need to feel superior. They march in, destroy everything, make sure no one dares resist again. That's how they control the galaxy. But now they're afraid. And fear makes them dangerous." Zalverath exhaled. "Then what's your next move?" Voss tapped a few commands into the console, pulling up a series of live feeds from Tarkan camps outside the city. The once organized outposts were in disarray. Guards huddled together in defensive clusters. High-ranking officers barked desperate orders, their controls slipping. He pointed at the largest camp. "We take their command structure." Zalverath's eyes widened. "You want to storm their base?" "We don't have the numbers for a direct assault." Voss smirked. "Who said anything about a direct assault?" Minutes later, the plan was set. Voss moved with his squad through the ruins, the cold night air thick with smoke and tension. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the enemy's operation. The Tarkan command center loomed ahead, a fortified outpost surrounded by heavy gunners and auto turrets. A brute force attack would be suicide. Good thing brute force wasn't the plan. Voss crouched behind cover, his earpiece buzzing. "Silva, you in position?" A voice responded, cool and focused. "Ready when you are," he signaled. A moment later, the lights across the Tarkan outpost flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the camp. Then came the whispers. Low, distorted human voices poured through the Tarkan's communication systems, overlapping, indecipherable. A psychological weapon, one Voss had perfected over years of asymmetric warfare. "We see you." The Tarkans scrambled, their weapons raised, blind in the sudden night. Every shadow was an enemy. Every sound a threat. Then the assassinations began. Silenced shots. Blades in the dark. One by one, officers fell, their lifeless bodies slumping against consoles and supply crates. The surviving soldiers panicked, firing at phantoms. Voss and his team moved through the chaos with surgical precision, dismantling defenses from the inside. By the time the emergency lights flickered back on, it was too late. Voss walked into the Tarkan command tent, stepping over the body of the last officer. The remaining survivors dropped their weapons, shaking. One of them, a high-ranking strategist, glared up at him. "You fight without honor." Voss crouched beside him. "Honor doesn't win wars." The Tarkan bared his teeth. "You will never be accepted in the Galactic Order." Voss laughed. "You think we care about that?" He grabbed the alien's comm device, activating an open channel to the Tarkan fleet. "This is Elias Voss of Hell's Dogs," he said, his voice calm. "Your leadership is dead. Your war is lost. I suggest you run while you still can." Silence stretched. Then a Tarkan officer's voice came through, uncertain. "We do not retreat." Voss's smirk was ice cold. "You will." He turned off the transmission and looked at his soldiers. Burn the place down. As flames rose into the night, the war for Zephyr was no longer about victory. It was about survival. And the Tarkans were losing. The sky burned with the glow of distant wreckage. Smoke curled into the air, mingling with the scent of charred metal and death. What had once been the Tarkans' unshakable front line was now a graveyard. Ruined transports, shattered exocets, and the bodies of fallen warriors littered the cracked ground. Elias Voss stood at the edge of it all, watching. His soldiers moved around him, silent professionals, finishing the last stages of their work. The Tarkan command structure was gone, their officers dead, their strategic outposts reduced to smoldering ruins. Yet, it wasn't over. A transmission crackled in his earpiece, Zalvaratha's voice tense. Voss. We intercepted their fleet communications. Warlord Vexaric is coming. That got his attention. He's leading the final push himself? Not just leading. He's bringing every remaining warship, every last soldier. Zalvarath hesitated. He means to end this. Voss exhaled. Good. He turned to his second-in-command, Kiara. How long until they arrive? She checked her tablet. A few hours, tops. We've hurt them, but this is their last stand. They'll throw everything at us. Voss studied the ruins, then the sky. The Tarkans weren't just coming for victory. They were coming for vengeance. That was fine. He keyed into his comms. All units, prepare for engagement. We're going to show them what happens when you push humans too far. The response was immediate. His soldiers moved with purpose, setting up ambush points, reinforcing fallback positions, planting explosives where the Tarkans would never suspect. They were tired, bruised, but there was a fire in them now. They had the enemy on the run, and no one wanted to let up. The Zephyr forces, however, were less certain. Inside the command bunker, Zalvara stood with his advisors, their expressions wary. The war had turned in their favor, but at what cost? The humans had not just won battles, they had eradicated the enemy at every step. You're turning us into something we weren't meant to be, one of the Zephyr strategists said quietly. Voss didn't look up from the map. And what were you meant to be? The strategist hesitated. Survivors. Voss chuckled. Then we're doing our job. Zalvarath leaned forward. You don't understand. The galaxy will see this. They'll see how you fight. And they'll fear you. Voss met his gaze. Good. A warning siren wailed through the bunker. The Tarkans had arrived. Voss stepped outside and saw the sky filled with enemy dropships, descending in waves. This wasn't a tactical maneuver. It was an onslaught. No strategy. No careful positioning. Just brute force. They were desperate. Kiara muttered. They're coming in hot. Voss adjusted his rifle. Then let's put them in the ground. The first impact rocked the city as the Tarkans landed, deploying massive war beasts and towering mechs. Plasma fire lit up the night. Explosions shattered old ruins. The ground itself trembled under the weight of the assault. But the humans had prepared. The first wave hit a wall of hidden explosives, detonating the moment the Tarkans reached their pre-selected choke points. Fire and shrapnel ripped through entire units, leaving nothing but twisted bodies. The second wave met something worse. Human snipers, embedded deep in the ruins, picked them off one by one. Precision shots shattered armor, pierced skulls, and left the battlefield littered with corpses before the Tarkans even realized where the shots were coming from. But the Tarkans kept coming. Voss moved through the battlefield, his rifle kicking against his shoulder with every shot. His squad fought alongside him, gunning down enemies with ruthless efficiency. Push them back, he ordered. His soldiers responded instantly, weaving through cover, outflanking their enemies, cutting them down with lethal precision. But then, something shifted. A massive Tarkan war machine dropped from the sky, landing with a deafening crash. The thing was a monster, 20 feet tall, plated in bioorganic armor, its limbs ending in razor-sharp energy blades. It let out a guttural, mechanical growl and charged. Voss barely had time to move before it smashed through a building, debris flying in all directions. Soldiers scattered as the machine carved through them, cutting down Cypher warriors like insects. Voss dodged behind cover, switching to armor-piercing rounds. He fired directly into the beast's weak points, but its armor was too thick. "Need heavy fire on that thing," he barked. Kira's voice crackled in his ear. "On it." A moment later, a rocket streaked through the air, slamming into the machine's side. It stumbled, roaring, but didn't fall. Voss didn't hesitate. He moved fast, weaving through wreckage, climbing onto the machine's back before it could react. He drove his combat knife into an exposed joint, twisting hard. The beast jerked violently, trying to shake him off, but he held firm, tearing at its circuits, disrupting its systems. Another rocket hit. Then another. The machine shuddered. Then it collapsed. Voss rolled off before it hit the ground, dusting himself off. That was fun! But there was no time to celebrate. A new figure entered the battlefield. Taller than the other Tarkans. Warlord Vexeric. His armor was heavier, his posture unwavering. He stared at the carnage around him, his forces in tatters, but he didn't look afraid. He looked furious. His deep, rumbling voice echoed across the battlefield. "You think you've won?" Voss smiled, raising his rifle. "Haven't I?" Vexeric stepped forward. "You fight like vermin. Like something unworthy of the stars." Voss fired. The shot bounced off the warlord's armor harmlessly. Vexeric moved like lightning, closing the distance before anyone could react. His massive fist caught Voss across the chest, sending him flying. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his ribs. He rolled, barely avoiding the next strike, as the warlord's blade slammed into the dirt where his head had been seconds ago. Voss grinned through the pain. "Now we're talking." The final battle had begun. Voss hit the ground hard. His body rolled through dirt and shattered debris, lungs burning as he fought to suck in air. The force of the blow had been like getting hit by a battering ram. Something inside his chest protested. Maybe a cracked rib, maybe worse, but pain was just information. He ignored it. Warlord Vexeric stood over him, massive and unmoving, a living monument to war itself. His bioarmor gleamed under the burning sky, the deep red glow of his warblade pulsing in his grip. The battlefield raged around them, gunfire, explosions, screams, but in this moment, it all faded to the background. Voss forced himself to his feet. His rifle was gone, torn from his hands when he hit the ground, but he still had his sidearm. He pulled it free, leveled it, and fired. The round struck center mass, but the warlord barely flinched. His armor absorbed the impact, the kinetic force dispersing harmlessly. Voss adjusted his aim, trying for the gaps between the plates, but Vexeric moved faster than something that big should be able to move. A sudden blur, then a crushing grip closed around his wrist. Before he could react, the warlord yanked him forward and drove a knee into his ribs. A sickening crunch, then agony. Voss hit the ground again, coughing blood. Vexeric loomed. "You call this war?" His voice was deep, rumbling, filled with contempt. "You are nothing but an infestation." Voss spit crimson onto the dirt and grinned. "That's so?" The warlord raised his war blade for the finishing strike. Then the first sniper round hit. Vexeric staggered as a high-caliber shot punched into his shoulder, sending a ripple through his massive frame. A second shot followed, slamming into his side. Not enough to kill him, but enough to hurt. That was all Voss needed. He twisted, wrenching his wrist free, and rolled clear of the next strike. His fingers found something in the rubble, a combat knife. Not much against a warlord in full armor, but he wasn't aiming for the armor. Voss lunged, aiming for the warlord's exposed throat. Vexeric reacted instantly, twisting away, but not fast enough. The blade sliced deep into the side of his neck, not a killing blow, but enough to send thick black blood spilling onto the ground. The warlord roared in fury, his war blade swinging in a deadly arc. Voss barely managed to duck in time, the heat of the plasma edge singing the air above his head. More sniper rounds slammed into Vexaric's torso, staggering him again. His armor was tough, but even he had limits. Voss didn't wait for an invitation. He drove forward, firing his sidearm point-blank into the warlord's wounded neck. Vexaric snarled, swiping at him with raw, inhuman strength. Voss took the hit, felt something in his shoulder snap, but he held his ground. He grabbed a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin with his teeth, and jammed it straight into the wound in the warlord's neck. Vexaric's eyes widened. Voss dove away. The explosion was deafening. When the dust cleared, the warlord was still standing. Barely. His armor was scorched, his neck torn open, his breathing ragged. He took a slow, unsteady step forward. Then he collapsed to his knees. Voss forced himself to his feet, muscles screaming in protest. He stood over the fallen warlord, sidearm aimed at his head. Vexaric's voice was weaker now. "We were the greatest in the galaxy." Voss shook his head. "Not anymore." He pulled the trigger. The warlord's body slumped, lifeless. Silence stretched across the battlefield. Then, one by one, the remaining Tarkin forces began to fall back. Their warlord was dead. Their command shattered. The fight had left them. A voice crackled through Voss's calm Kiera. "They're retreating." He exhaled, feeling the exhaustion settle into his bones. "Good. Make sure they don't stop." The battle was over. The war was won. Later, in the remains of the Zephyr command bunker, Zalvareth watched the reports come in. His people had survived. The Tarkins had fled. Victory should have felt like salvation. But as he looked at the humans standing across from him, he felt something else. Fear. "You've changed everything," Zalvareth said quietly. Voss smiled. "That's what we do." The war was over. But humanity's rise had just begun.